So language as a communication system, or language is a communicative system for the community. This is how it's viewed. And this also holds true with other cognitive studies. One of the main tenets of cultural research is that there's always variation within human cognition. So even if people come out thinking a little bit differently about speech from person to person, it doesn't mean there isn't a consistent pattern there. Now, the next section is linguistic input. Of course, the actual structure of language is a category in itself. While linguistic perceptions exist without the presence of actual speech, it is the linguistic features, whether they be unmarked or marked, that lead a person to access these other categories. So a person may not know what feature they are referencing, but there is still some trigger that pulls up the set or the cluster of information that is language. So they may hear y'all, or they may hear monophoneized I. Whatever bit of linguistic information that they hear or they think about, it brings in all of this other bits of information, like social acceptability, etc. Again, all these categories are intertwined. Linguistic perceptions are formed by a combination of these different categories. While we can talk about them separately, they're inherently linked to the topic of language itself. Now, there are layers of categories. Region is a known common category, and it's something we can attach to other issues, like the idea of standard versus non-standard speech, like local or non-local, like pleasant or unpleasant. So if the hearer can place the speaker in his home area or in another salient region, then he can access the other information that he is associated with it. It exists as a bundle. And this is where the attitude or perception is formed, in this big bundle of categories, that in this cognitive model that we understand as speech. Now with that, the title of my talk is a cognitive model of Southern speech. So the model, taking all this into consideration, how people look at language, let's look at it. Now, the South is regionally recognized, very commonly regionally recognized. It's viewed and described as local or non-local commonly. It's viewed negatively for well-spokenness, both inside and outside the community. But it's viewed positively for all other attributes, making it a valid part of language. Because this fits in with the social view of language. There has to be something good about it for it to continue, for people to continue to talk about it. Overall, there's strong information contained in each category. So all these four categories and their subcategories that we talk about, the strongest perceptions are about the South. And it is this model put together that keeps in our minds about Southern speech. Now, as a kind of a afterthought, final note, I started thinking about the South in terms of cognitive and semantic ideals. And I've come to the conclusion that the South, it stands out for us because it works as a prototype. Now, if what I've just talked about is really how we view language, and that the South is viewed saliently in all of these terms, then we can look at Southern as the prototype for linguistic perceptions. Why is Southern such a widely recognized dialect? Because the Southern exemplifies the set of categories people use in their perceptions of language, which are therefore easily transferred through the community. Okay? Southern has become the prototype for the term dialect, even the term accent, and possibly, potentially, even the term language in the United States. Now, admittedly, this is a cyclical categorization process. We think about language in a certain way and pass on to others how we think about it. With each new discussion of language in these terms, we reinforce the cognitive patterns and categorical properties that are salient. South has been regarded as a key dialect and is referred to in the media and commonly by folk. Therefore, people understand it to have qualities on these lines. Also, people recognize its qualities and therefore use it as a prototype for a dialect. So it keeps reinforcing itself. Thank you.
Any questions for Susan? Comments? Do you want that?
No, I don't need a microphone. I'm almost as loud as this. But well with what Dennis was talking about before, following up on the Giles framework of possibilities. And I just wonder whether you comment on the way that Dennis did it and the way that you did it, in that he has reached type B in Giles, which really distills, I think it's pointing in the same direction as what you're talking about, but I wonder whether you could make the comparison for us.
I was very excited to listen to Dennis's talk because I went, yes, it fits, and it just everything kept rolling and everything that the other presenters were talking about as well. I think it's approaching perceptions and perceptions of the South from different points of view, from different theoretical perspectives. And I think that only strengthens the idea of these categories, and that there are specific bits of information that we hold and attach to the South. It's not just structural linguistic information, that there are other aspects as well. And I think all of this is wrapped together. And I think his research brings that out specifically in that it is a type D category. You know, there's a larger bit of information. We do have these specific perceptions, and I'm going from here.
On your prototype slide, you had Southern, and I was just wondering, is Southern, using that term, is that simply the language variation, or does it include the other characteristics that go with it?
The way, if you went onto the street and said Southern as far as anything, you know, if you're talking about speech, you know, if you said specifically Southern speech, regardless if you throw that term speech in there, all the other categories fit, you know, they're accessed as well. So, you know, the main aspect is you can't really separate them. And that's why I retitled my talk as the answer to Ron Butter's question when he left, is when he asked Dennis, how do you separate them? How do you know to think about language? My conclusion is you don't. Or you do at the same time, because when people think about language, they think of all the other categories. And in the folk mind, you cannot separate them.
Any questions or comments? This was an absolutely fantastic panel. I thought this was great. Thank all of you very much. Let's give these people a big hand.